In Tama City Hono Academy, Kanon, a beautiful demon, watches over the school from the disciplinary committee's window. Suddenly, a boy named Yuji enters the room in a trance-like state. However, the moment he crosses the threshold, the spell breaks and his awareness returns. Kanon informs him that she had summoned his soul because she intends to devour him. Yuji reacts with bewilderment rather than fear, prompting Kanon to transform into her demon form and introduce herself proudly as a gourmet demon. Before arriving in the human world, Kanon resided in the demon realm, where extravagant platters were presented to her daily. However, food never tasted good to her. She decided to visit her father, Beelzebub. She admitted that ordinary food no longer satisfied her. She wanted to try devouring human souls, particularly those of young humans. She explained that she planned to nurture them carefully before consuming them. Beelzebub ultimately decided that the experience would be beneficial for her growth. However, before she could leave, he casually asked whether she had shared a meal with anyone recently. Kanon reassured him that she had not dined with anyone. Satisfied with her answer, Beelzebub wished her luck before returning his attention to his meal. Upon arriving in the human world, Kanon disguised herself as a strikingly beautiful high school girl. She quickly adapted to her new environment and excelled in nearly every aspect of school life, gaining the trust and admiration of the people around her, which secured her a position on the disciplinary committee. Standing on the school rooftop, she looked down at the humans. To her, the school had become her personal pasture. One morning, her hunger finally became impossible to ignore. She decided it was time to feast on at least one soul. She scanned the crowd until a particular soul caught her attention, and it was Yuji's. Without hesitation, she placed him under a trance and silently commanded him to come to the disciplinary committee's office. Now standing before her, Yuji remains confused, and Kanon begins describing how she intends to prepare him. However, Yuji completely misinterprets her words and assumes she is flirting with him. To her surprise, he suddenly kneels and bows deeply, thanking her for paying attention to him. Kanon is confused as Yuji explains that it has always been his dream to be devoured by a beautiful girl like her. He even adds that the fact that her demon cosplay makes the situation better. Realizing that Yuji has a very different understanding of the word devour, Kanon begins to panic internally. Yuji starts undressing as Kanon begins convincing herself that she can simply take his soul during the act. However, she becomes nervous when she realizes she has no experience with intimacy. When Yuji pulls off his shirt, Kanon hurriedly insists that he should only share intimacy with someone he loves. Yuji steps closer and reassures her that he already likes her. He assumes that she must have summoned him because she liked him first. The statement catches Kanon off guard as she silently wonders what it truly means to like someone. As she studies Yuji more carefully, she suddenly notices that he is actually handsome. Yuji continues insisting that he likes her, causing Kanon to panic. She attempts to steady herself, reminding herself that she is a powerful demon and should remain in control. During her internal turmoil, Yuji quietly puts his clothes back on, assuming that he had overwhelmed her. Kanon notices his consideration and briefly thinks that he is being surprisingly thoughtful. However, her composure shatters again when he casually suggests they could still fool around in other ways. Seeing Kanon struggle, Yuji decides to suggest that they should start by dating instead. To her own surprise, the suggestion immediately calms her down. After a moment of hesitation, she agrees. Yuji's face lights up with excitement, as if he has just won the lottery. He quickly finishes putting on the rest of his uniform and rushes out of the room. Left alone, she starts to believe that she may have been tricked. Later that day, Yuji's childhood friend Nadeshiko asks if he can help clean her family's shrine. Yuji declines by casually mentioning that he has a girlfriend. At first, Nadeshiko treats it like nothing. Then the meaning suddenly sinks in and she reacts in shock. Yuji happily explains that Kanon is a senior at their school. Nadeshiko becomes genuinely happy for him and asks if he has a nickname for her. When Yuji looks at her in confusion, she explains that lovers usually have nicknames for each other. She feels like Yuji is the type to call a girlfriend by her first name, which gives Yuji an idea. Meanwhile, Kanon is looking over the other students when Yuji suddenly appears before her, causing her to fall back in surprise. He jumps through the window, insisting that Kanon call him by his first name since they are dating. She begins to grow nervous, but then decides to use this to her advantage. She starts to tease him, intending to let him know their hierarchy with each other. However, Yuji actually looks excited at her teasing. His reaction is so bright that she admits to herself that he is kind of cute. She tries calling out his name, but struggles to get even the first syllable out. So she repeats his name in her head before trying again. Unfortunately, it results in the same outcome. Yuji asks if she is embarrassed, but Kanon tries to hide it by demanding that he call her by her first name first. He does so without hesitation, which surprises Kanon and even makes her feel excited. After experiencing that brief sense of bliss, she regains her composure and assumes that Yuji also wants to feel the same thing. He begins to coax her into saying his name, even whispering into her ear. This makes Kanon panic and feel even more embarrassed. She tries to resist his charm, knowing that if she allows herself to enjoy the sound of her name from him, she might end up falling for Yuji. To break the moment, she slaps him away and reminds him to add senpai at the end to be respectful. With him now at a distance, she moves toward the door but manages to say somewhat proper goodbye while finally saying his name. Yuji immediately brightens. Then, while she is leaving, he calls after her again, causing her to stumble. When she finally reaches the stairs, she wonders why her feelings feel so mixed. Suddenly, she notices two students flirting with each other and quickly scolds them. Upon recognizing her, the students separate and run away. She reflects that humans always give in to their desires, and as she watches the other students, she vows to make sure their souls will not be tainted so that she can devour them all someday. Yuji suddenly appears behind her, mentioning that he wants to be like those couples someday, which immediately sends Kanon into a panic. She decides that now is the time to put him in his place. After putting some distance between them, she asks what Yuji really wants. This question confuses him, since he believes it is normal for couples to want to be together. Then he casually asks where she wants their first time to be. As he talks about it, Kanon suddenly stiffens, then panics because he is already thinking about locations. She feels herself growing frustrated because Yuji is moving too fast, since things like that are supposed to happen after marriage. She composes herself outwardly and asks where he would like to go instead. Yuji honestly tells her that he would like to go to the park, which makes Kanon nervous again since he seems willing to do it in a public space. Yuji explains that he wants it to be memorable so that every time they pass by the park, they will remember it. However, Kanon feels overwhelmed and quickly asks for a different place. He then suggests that they go to the movies, which only flusters and frustrates Kanon even more since it is still a public setting. So he decides that they should plan a trip together. This idea briefly excites Kanon, but she immediately thinks he is shameless when he suddenly suggests going to the hot springs. She quickly explains that something memorable should happen in the privacy of a room. As she continues complaining, Yuji calmly writes down in his notes that their first time should be in his room. Kanon rolls on the ground in embarrassment, and Yuji crawls on top of her, mentioning how touched he is that they are seriously discussing how to make many good memories on their first date. Kanon pauses, then suddenly screams as she realizes that she had misunderstood the meaning of first time. She hurriedly tries to cover up her mistake by acting confident and firmly declares that their first date will be in his room while his parents are around. With that, she quickly scurries away in embarrassment. At the end of the school day, Kanon watches the students head home when Yuji appears beside her and invites her to walk home with him. She is shocked and asks why she has to walk home with him. He simply answers that he is her boyfriend, and that statement immediately makes her heart flutter. She decides to act confident and humor him by agreeing, since this is once again another perfect opportunity to prove that she is above him. However, during the walk home, she immediately begins to lag behind because her heart is racing, causing her to feel unusually exhausted. When Yuji asks why she is not walking beside him, she tries to cover it up by saying that it is dangerous, so he needs to act as her shield. This only encourages Yuji to protect her, so he pulls her closer than before, reassuring her that he can protect her from anything. He then offers his hand to keep her close, but Kanon only stares at it. She begins to panic because she believes that holding hands will somehow result in her getting pregnant, and she curses him for being so romantic. His hand suddenly looks threatening to her, yet she knows she needs to make a decision. A little later, people begin staring at them because Kanon has decided to tie his hands together so she can hold the other end of the rope. She tells him that this is what holding her hand means and asks how Yuji feels about it. To her surprise, Yuji seems to be enjoying the treatment because to him, it shows how much Kanon does not want to let him go. He believes that her desire to dominate him both mentally and physically is her expression of love. She becomes so embarrassed by his declaration that she ends up running away from him. She walks toward the park, hoping to clear her head, but soon begins hearing Yuji's voice. She thinks it is just a figment of her imagination. But when she turns around, she realizes that he's actually being dragged along the ground because she forgot that she is still holding the other end of the rope tied to his hands. He suddenly gets up and admits that it was the most exciting walk he has ever had. He even shares that being treated like a pet might actually be enjoyable. When she turns away from him in frustration, he tries to remedy the situation by inviting her to try something. Kanon's mind immediately jumps to something inappropriate, so she is surprised when they end up sitting on a bench with croquettes in hand. Yuji shares that he has always wanted to eat together with his girlfriend. Kanon visibly relaxes and reaches into the plastic bag for the sauces, but Yuji quickly tells her not to add any because it tastes amazing and adding sauce would be disrespectful. Kanon wonders why he is making such a big deal out of it and tells him that she will eat it the way she wants. However, Yuji begins passionately explaining why the croquette is already perfect on its own. His explanation makes her giggle because she never expected Yuji to feel so strongly about eating a croquette. She decides to humor him and agrees to eat it plain. When she takes a bite, she is shocked by how good it tastes because before eating it, nothing had ever tasted good to her. Beside her, Yuji also comments that it somehow tastes better today, but he concludes that the reason must be that he is eating it next to her. Kanon is surprised by his reasoning, yet she continues eating more earnestly, while Yuji happily comments on how cute she looks when she eats, which makes her blush. One day in the underworld, Beelzebub eats while wondering how Kanon is doing in the human world. He keeps eating out of worry, to the point that his maid, Ami, begins to express concern over his troubled state. He shares that he is worried about Kanon, and Ami immediately volunteers to head to the human world to serve her. When he gives his blessing, she smiles wickedly to herself. In the human world, Kanon wakes up from her slumber. She opens her eyes in her room inside a house belonging to a family she had brainwashed into believing that she is the couple's daughter. Her fake parents and little brother greet her as usual, and in their eyes, Kanon is the perfect eldest daughter. Kanon politely bids them goodbye as she prepares to go to school, showing affection to her brother and mother. She chose this family because they seemed kind, and exploiting kindness is what demons do best. Suddenly, the family begins to feel that something is off, forcing Kanon to strengthen the hypnosis placed on them. Once she is finished, she finally leaves for school. She smiles to herself, feeling refreshed after toying with humans, especially since she has been slacking off lately and not acting like a proper demon. As she wonders to herself what humans truly are, she begins muttering the answer, but then hears Yuji asking what she is doing. She is shocked to see him standing in front of her house, but Yuji simply states that since he is her boyfriend, he wants to walk to school together. It takes her a moment to recover, but once she does, she demands to know how he found her house. Yuji admits that he had asked Yuriko, Kanon's homeroom teacher, and that Yuriko had willingly given him the information due to being a fan of romance. He then tries inviting her to walk with him, and she decides to allow it on the condition that he keeps up with her. Without explaining herself, she suddenly dashes forward, confident that her abilities as a demon will allow her to shake Yuji off. However, as she runs, she quickly feels herself getting tired and begins to slow down. Yuji eventually jogs beside her and asks if she is tired. Kanon tries hard not to admit that her stamina is the weakest among all her abilities. But since she clearly looks like she is struggling, Yuji finds it hard to believe her denial. To hide her weakness, she tries to reason that a woman must always walk behind her man. She feels like the saying might make her sound dignified, but Yuji quickly points out that the phrase is meant for wives, which embarrasses her even more. She attempts to hide her embarrassment again, so Yuji hands her a bottle of water so she can cool off with a drink, but asks her to save some for him so he can drink later. As she prepares to drink the water, Kanon begins to wonder if Yuji is giving it to her so he can get an indirect kiss from her. Her gaze drifts back and forth between the bottle and Yuji. Determined to gain the upper hand, she gulps down the entire contents of the bottle and then throws it away. Near the school, Ami tries to locate Kanon and becomes excited when she notices her walking nearby. She immediately approaches Kanon, but Kanon looks furious and quickly drags Ami away to the disciplinary committee room. Once they are alone, Kanon scolds Ami and demands to know why she is in the human world. Ami acts delighted and even pulls Kanon into her chest, as she happily explains that she came to serve her. Kanon pushes her away, but at that moment, Yuji appears and asks who Ami is. To avoid suspicion, Kanon explains that Ami has been her maid since she was little, hiding the fact that Ami is a demon. However, Kanon secretly believes that Ami must have tricked Beelzebub into letting her travel to the human world for personal reasons. Pretending to be hurt, Ami once again smothers Kanon against her chest, insisting that she truly came just to serve her. Kanon immediately realizes that Ami is the worst possible demon for Yuji to meet because Ami openly encourages cheating on partners, and Kanon fears that Yuji might willingly accept such an offer given how eager he was to be her boyfriend. She tries to keep the two apart and warns Yuji to stay away from Ami. Ami notices that Kanon seems unusually protective of Yuji and playfully asks to be introduced to him properly. However, after carefully studying Yuji, she realizes that his soul is of extremely high quality. Without hesitation, she suddenly pounces on him, intending to devour him herself. Kanon quickly pulls her off Yuji and firmly declares that Yuji is off limits. This confuses Ami, and Kanon finds herself shyly admitting that Yuji is her boyfriend. Ami immediately becomes excited upon hearing the news, and because Kanon is clearly embarrassed, she takes the opportunity to tease her even more about her relationship. She eagerly asks for all the juicy details but becomes very disappointed when Kanon admits that they have only gone as far as holding hands and eating together. Ami concludes that Kanon is far too innocent to be a proper demon, since she gets flustered so easily. She insists that Kanon only needs to let Yuji touch her, and he will stay completely devoted to her. However, Kanon calls the idea indecent, despite being a demon herself. Ami then warns Kanon that if she moves too slowly, she might end up eating Yuji herself instead. However, Yuji firmly refuses her offer and declares that Kanon is the only girl for him. Outwardly, Kanon pretends to be annoyed by his statement, but deep down she feels genuinely happy about his loyalty, something that Ami immediately notices. Ami continues teasing them, suggesting that she would not mind if the three of them entered a relationship together, claiming that it is perfectly fine for Yuji to have multiple girlfriends. Kanan tries to argue with her, but Ami clings to Yuji in an attempt to make him agree. However, Yuji only looks confused and asks Kanan if he somehow became popular, which only makes her more irritated. Later, Kanan notices that several students are passed out along the hallway. They all have blissful expressions on their faces, and the trail seems to lead toward the science lab. She overhears some students talking about how attractive a dark-skinned maid is, so she immediately rushes toward the lab, feeling that Ami is behind all of this. When she enters, she catches Ami and Yuriko just as they are about to kiss. Yuriko becomes embarrassed after being caught and quickly runs away, while Ami remains completely calm and satisfied with herself. Kanan becomes furious because the humans Ami had been feeding on were the very souls she had worked hard to nurture. Kanan herself had not even fed on a single one of them yet. Ami casually complains that it is Kanan's fault for being too slow. Kanan argues that Ami is too easy, which prompts Ami to defend herself by claiming that she only feeds on people she finds charming. Kanan does not believe her and begins pointing out Ami's questionable choices among her prey, but Ami calmly responds that each of them had something she personally found charming. Kanan becomes frustrated because this only proves that Ami can feed on almost anyone. Ami then justifies her actions by explaining that all of them had been kind and charming to her when they first met. Kanan is genuinely surprised by this explanation because it shows that Ami is capable of seeing the good in others, something she never expected from her personality. She slowly begins to understand why Ami is so popular, even among the other maids back in the demon world. However, this realization does not excuse the chaos she caused at school. Kanan starts by apologizing to Ami for misjudging her and acknowledges that Ami does, in fact, have standards. Still, she firmly warns Ami not to feed on students within the school grounds because it makes memory erasure extremely troublesome. Ami agrees and promises that she will only target non-students in the future. Kanan then nervously asks whether Ami finds Yuji charming. Ami immediately recognizes the name as Kanan's boyfriend, and upon noticing Kanan's flustered expression, she deliberately chooses not to reveal her true thoughts about him. Kanan desperately tries to remain indifferent, but Ami can clearly tell that she's becoming jealous and curious. A little later, as Kanan patrols the school grounds, she finds herself worrying that Yuji might fall for Ami someday. She imagines the possibility happening right under her nose and pictures Yuji already falling under Ami's charm. The thought causes her to pace faster and faster until she suddenly comes up with an idea. She decides to allow Yuji to follow her around school while she performs her disciplinary duties. To her, this is the best way to keep an eye on him so Ami will not be able to make a move. She also believes this is the perfect opportunity to teach Yuji about their hierarchy and remind him that he will always be beneath her. As she thinks this, she unknowingly releases a cold aura that Yuji can clearly feel. Nearby, a girl suddenly trips and drops her papers, and Yuji immediately rushes over to help her. He even offers to carry the papers to the faculty office, which causes the girl to quickly develop a crush on him. Kanan notices this and immediately steps between them, instructing the girl to return to her class since she's already fine. After the girl leaves without question, Kanan asks Yuji if he is popular, but Yuji seems completely unaware of his own charm. She suddenly remembers Ami's teasing about jealousy and desperately tries to prove that she is not jealous at all. Unfortunately, Ami happens to witness the entire interaction from nearby. Later, another girl accidentally bumps into Yuji and immediately falls for him after seeing his face. Kanan quickly calls his attention. Soon after, a different girl slips on the stairs, and once again, Yuji manages to catch her, forcing Kanan to guide him away yet again. Later still, Yuji approaches a rich girl named Perika because there is a fish cake-shaped object on her hair. She corrects him by explaining that it is actually a decorative hair clip, but she uses the opportunity to flirt with him, which only irritates Kanan even more because it feels like every romantic comedy trope is suddenly happening around her. She finally decides to complain to Yuji for attracting so many girls. She calls him irresponsible for being such a heartthrob and insists that she will make him understand his proper position. Yuji calmly responds that his position is her boyfriend. Kanan blushes because he clearly understands his role and is confident about it. Because of that, she decides not to punish him. Suddenly, his phone rings and he notices a message from Nadeshiko. Kanan grows curious, so Yuji explains that Nadeshiko is his childhood friend from the same class. She reads their exchange and notices how familiar they seem with each other. Although Yuji sees nothing wrong, the idea of him being close to another girl bothers Kanan, so she grabs his phone and begins insulting him. After school, as they walk home, Kanan deliberately keeps some distance between them, causing Yuji to ask if she is angry with him. She denies it at first, but later stops and presses her head against his chest. She complains that he already belongs to her, so he cannot go around flirting with other girls. When she looks up, Yuji notices tears forming in her eyes. He tells her that he finds this jealous side of her adorable. Kanan tries to argue, but she becomes distracted when he starts petting her hair. An unfamiliar, warm, and giddy feeling begins to spread through her body from the affection he shows. She tries to resist it, but the more he pats and scratches her head, the more she finds herself melting under his attention. From the rooftop, Ami watches the two of them with amusement, fascinated that Kanan has chosen to date a human of all creatures. However, behind her, Ami looks at Yuriko's blissful state. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe to see what happens next.